Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So if you haven't heard, Xbox is having a pretty rough 2022. And I don't want to sugarcoat that, right? Because there have been a handful of issues that I really hope that Xbox is aware of and is taking steps to fix as quickly as possible. However, there have been a lot of people, both in articles and on social media, who have been using these scattered incidents to weaponize against the Xbox fan base and against the Xbox leadership, going as far as to call for some of those people to be fired. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous, and I'd like to tell you why. So, the first major thing that went wrong, and probably the one that most of you are more familiar with, is that Starfield and Redfall have both been delayed out of 2022 and into 2023. And I think we can all agree delays suck, right? We want to play the game as soon as possible, but we also have to admit that at the end of the day, delays are a good thing, right? There's that really famous and super overused Miyamoto quote that says, "A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is bad forever." And while I don't think that that's true anymore, we've seen games like No Man's Sky, Final Fantasy XIV, even Cyberpunk to an extent, come out just completely broken and unplayable and improve over time to be regarded as being much better than they used to be, right? So while I don't think that that quote necessarily holds up in 2022, I agree with the principle of it, which is just that if a game is broken, don't release it. I don't want to play a broken game. You don't want to play a broken game. Nobody wants to play a broken game. So if you have to delay it to make sure that when I play the game, it is working and good, go right ahead and do it. For me, the problem is not that these two games were delayed. The problem is that there wasn't anything to replace it. And a couple years ago, that might have not have been that surprising, right? Back when Xbox only had 5 studios, it's easy to see, okay, well, maybe not every single studio is going to be able to have something to come out in 2022. But after this Activision Blizzard deal goes through, they're going to have over 30. So I can understand people being more confused about, you have so many studios now. Why couldn't any of them put out a game in 2022? And unfortunately, the fact of the matter is, I don't think it's altogether surprising that this is the case. I mean, going from 5 to 30, I think it's 32, over 30 studios in just a handful of years, that's going to have some growing pains, right? You don't see that amount of growth without it. I'm 6.5 feet tall. I know a thing or two about growing pains, right? At some point in middle school, I grew like a foot in 2 years. I've still got the stretch marks to prove it, right? These sorts of things, they don't go off without a hitch. It just doesn't happen, especially when you consider that right as they were trying to bring all of these teams together, a global pandemic broke out and made it impossible for them to bring these teams together in one place. It made it so much more difficult to get all of these people on the same page, to get all of these teams functioning in unison. It made it pretty much impossible. And then on top of that, as if a global pandemic wasn't enough, now we've also got the war in the Ukraine taking games out of the Xbox library. We've already seen games like Replaced got delayed out of this year because the studio that was making it is directly in the middle of a war zone. And then we're probably going to see even more games get delayed for the same purpose, if not entirely canceled. Things like Stalker 2 or Atomic Heart. Basically, any game studio that exists in Russia, the Ukraine, or the neighboring countries is at risk of getting pulled into this war at any moment. So it just feels like everything is going wrong for Xbox right now. And it kind of is, right? It's a really rough time for them. And I think that while we should continue to demand better, we should continue to ask for things to come out and for things to flow better, I think we also need to have a little bit of sympathy for just what a terrible situation they find themselves in because of just the really unfortunate timing of everything that happened, right? And are there things that they could have done to correct this problem? Yes, and maybe they'll do some of them, right? Maybe we'll see them take more aggressive Game Pass deals for the remaining of the year and get Saints Row or Gotham Knights or Hogwarts Legacy into Game Pass on day one. That would be outstanding, right? Or it's probably too late for it, but maybe they would be able to get some kind of exclusive rights for some more third-party games in the upcoming years in order to sort of bolster that library while it's still coming together. Now, of course, journalists hate when Xbox does third-party exclusive deals, despite the fact that it's like PlayStation's bread and butter. But maybe they should do it anyway, right? There's the Xbox showcase on the 12th, and maybe they'll announce some new first-party exclusive games coming out this year at that. We've heard rumors of things like Forza Motorsport. We've heard rumors of things like the Marcus Phoenix collection, and we've heard rumors that there might be a Halo campaign expansion. But one of the things that Xbox fan base is probably really tired of hearing is Xbox Gears and Forza, or sorry, Halo Gears and Forza, right? And having these things come out this year would be better than nothing. I would certainly be interested in playing a Halo Infinite campaign expansion or going back and playing some of the old Gears games, but it doesn't really solve the problem. It just stymies some of the symptoms of it, right? And maybe that's all that they are able to do this year. And I know that people are going to be really upset that I say this, because we've been hearing it for years, and I'm tired of hearing it, but I'm going to say it anyway. We just have to wait until next year. I know, we've heard it too many times, but look at what Xbox has done, right? They are up to almost over 30 studios once this Activision Blizzard deal goes through. They have announced so many games as being in active development. Some of them are set to come out, were supposed to come out this year, and they're going to come out next year. There's ones that are supposed to come out next year that hopefully will come out next year. There's ones that we probably haven't even heard of. There are so many games. I think there's more than 20 games announced as being in active development at Xbox right now, and that's just the ones we know titles for, right? There will be games, hopefully as early as next year, maybe even some at the end of this year. Look at all the work that they've done to get more content into Game Pass. Look at all the work that they've done to get more Japanese content onto the Xbox platform. Phil Spencer is over in Japan all the time, making relationships, building rapport with Japanese studios to make them see that the Xbox platform is worthwhile to put their stuff on, right? These things take a lot of time. You know, when Phil Spencer took over Xbox as a brand, Don Matrick had left that thing, that battleship that is Xbox, sinking in the ocean for years. And when Phil Spencer got in, all he had to bail it out was 2 teaspoons. And he's been busting his ass bailing that ship out. He upgraded to a bucket. He brought in Sarabon. He brought in Matt Booty. And they've all been bailing this thing out. And now they've gotten it up to the surface. We can see that it is a battleship. But they still got to patch these holes. It's going to take some time. And I'm sick of being patient, and you're sick of being patient, but we don't really have another choice. So that's just the reality of the situation. So the second issue that I see brought up all the time when I see these arguments of Xbox having major management issues is the problems going on over at Undead Labs. And in my mind, the problems going on at Undead Labs really have no business even being brought up in this conversation for a number of reasons. First of all, I've read all of the articles talking about this, and I could only find 3 problems, and 2 of them are extremely minor, right? The problems that I found are pre-production on State of Decay 3 has been messy, which is not surprising considering that they started pre-production on State of Decay 3 during a pandemic. The head of the studio, Jeff Strain, has stepped away to move back with his family, which is a blow to the leadership of the company, but is not necessarily something we can hold against him. I mean, he moved to be back with his family. You know what I mean? Like, what are we going to do about that? And then the one that is, in my mind, more of a problem is that there have been reports that women at the company are having trouble being heard or feeling heard, right? They feel that their opinions on things are not being taken as seriously as those of their male counterparts. Which, unfortunately, if you've been following recent events, particularly in America, is not a rare occurrence, which by no means makes this one better. But the thing that makes me feel like these are a non-issue over at Undead Labs right now is because we didn't hear about these problems from an article. It wasn't some Kotaku expose that like revealed all these things about Undead Labs. No, we heard about it first from the leadership at Undead Labs. They came out and they said, look, we are having these problems, we are aware of these problems, and we are working to correct them. And then when that Kotaku article did finally come out, in the article, which I assume people only ever read the title of and didn't read the actual body of the article, it says that they've already seen major improvements in all 3 issues over the last 6 months. So yes, these are problems that Undead Labs had, but they're problems that are already half a year on the road to recovery. So it doesn't seem like it's worth bringing them up, right? People will claim that Xbox's hands-off approach to managing their studios is biting them in the ass because of these problems at Undead Labs, but I think it's the exact opposite. You look at this and it's like, why didn't Xbox step in and do something? Undead Labs is already fixing the problem. If Undead Labs' leadership is capable of fixing the problem on their own, why should Xbox stick their nose in that and stir it up, right? The leadership at Undead Labs has proven, as we've seen from the article, that they are capable of fixing their problem, and they're going to be better off for having been allowed to do it themselves, by not having their hands held through it, by not being forced to fix it. They found a solution that worked for them, that worked for their studio culture, and worked for the people who work there currently, right? That studio is going to be better off because they went through it themselves. They learned how to solve these problems themselves. Sometimes you have to do something wrong before you can learn how to do it right. It's a fact of life. And I know that having mistakes happen is a bad thing, and it is. But no one knows how to fix a problem more than somebody who has fixed it in the past. And Undead Labs is no longer a studio that has a problem. They're a studio that has found a solution. And then there's people talking about the mass exodus of people from the initiative. And this one, I don't even know if it's true. Like, something about it just feels fishy to me. First of all, I've read through all of the articles, and the only names I can find of people who have left the initiative are 2, right? Dan Newberger and Drew Murray. And in the article that I found talking about Newberger leaving, there's a link that says he's the latest in a seeming mass exodus. And when you click on that link, all it does is it takes you to a different article that says Newberger is the second high-profile departure. So we're up to 2. The only other thing I could find was 2 completely unsubstantiated paragraphs in an article on a website I didn't recognize, written by a freelancer who claims that they did some LinkedIn deep diving to find a list of 30 people. But they didn't have the names of any of those people. They didn't have a reason for why those people said that they left. They didn't have a quote. All they had was a handful of job titles that anybody could have either made up or pulled off any game studio job board in existence. So I have no idea if this mass exodus is true or ever happened or is even remotely accurate in terms of numbers, because if you look at LinkedIn right now and you look at the number of employees that the initiative has, it says 56. So if 30 people left, 30 plus 56 is 86, about 90. You're telling me a full third of this studio up and left? If that had happened, you wouldn't need to do a LinkedIn deep dive to find out about it. We live in the age of social media. Somebody would have said something. We would have names, we would have quotes, we would have complaints. Like, we would know the exact reason why these people left. It wouldn't just be, 30 people disappeared in the middle of the night one time. Like, that's, like, when that doesn't happen. That's not a thing, right? It just doesn't feel right. Now, that being said, I guarantee that the number of people who have left the initiative is way higher than 2 people. And that's because turnover is very normal, right? Okay, think of any job you've had before. right? I've had a couple. I've worked at movie theater, I've worked at a big box store, I've worked at a clothing store, and at every single one of those locations, we had a solid amount of turnover. I cannot imagine that the games industry is immune from doing so, especially when you consider what the initiative is trying to do. They've hired some of the top talent from the best studios in the world, right? We're talking about Naughty Dog, Insomniac, Rockstar, which, by the way, are we saying that those studios are having management problems because people left those studios to come to the initiative? No? Crazy how that works, right? Anyway, we're hiring all this top talent from all of these other studios and bringing them together and saying, okay, now make a game. It's not going to be that easy, right? These are highly creative people. These are highly skilled people. But you take this many people who have never worked together and you put them in a room and just say, go, there's going to be some things that have to be hammered out first. There's going to be some issues that rise up. There's going to be some people who just don't fit together. There's going to be people who butt heads, right? It's very normal, especially on a brand new team like this. This studio doesn't have like an established culture or an established workflow or anything like that. Every single thing that they're doing at the initiative, they are doing for the very first time. Even though these people have worked in the industry before, this studio is brand new. Now, they might get up and running faster than they would if every single person here was like fresh out of college making a game for the first time. But the fact of the matter is, it's an entirely brand new team. This is something that we haven't seen on this scale in the games industry, maybe ever. And we're just going to have patience for it. When you add on the stress that the public is putting onto the initiative, not Xbox, the public is putting on the initiative, because journalists and fans on Twitter are saying, "Oh, the initiative's game is gonna rival that of the studios they came from. It's gonna be a Naughty Dog quality game. It's gonna be an Insomniac quality game. It's gonna be a Rockstar quality game," and it's not, right? Also, on top of that, you add the fact that people were demanding to see what the initiative was working on, like within a year of them announcing that the initiative was going to be formed. Like, let them get on their feet. Like, they're still hiring people for this studio. The people want to be upset that they've brought in Crystal Dynamics to help with Perfect Dark, but the only reason that they've had to do that is because the public is rushing this team to try and get something out. So Gallagher, the guy who's in charge of the initiative, reached out to his old team and said, guys, can you help us out with this? We got to put a game out. And so it's, when Perfect Dark comes out, it's not even going to be like indicative of what this studio is capable of, which, to be clear, this team has all of the tools necessary to make a game that is on the level of Naughty Dog or Insomniac or Rockstar or any of the studios that they came from. But it's not going to happen on their first game. Not just because now it's basically a Crystal Dynamics game, but because nobody hits a home run on their first time to bat, right? And probably the second one won't be amazing either. They're going to have to put out a game, learn from it, put out a new game, learn from it. We might see something on Naughty Dog level from their third or fourth game, maybe. But it's just, Perfect Dark will not be a good indicator of what this team is capable of. Now, maybe they'll take some people from Crystal Dynamics to fill in some of those empty positions now that Crystal Dynamics has been sold off to Embracer. But regardless, to get back on track, people are blowing this way out of proportion. Turnover is completely normal at a company, especially when it's a brand new team who is being thrown together for the first time. So just settle down. And then by far, the most ludicrous argument that I've heard as to why Xbox has a management problem is because 343 put out a bad game. Like, what? Like, are we going to say that every single studio that has put out a bad game has a management problem? Because I got bad news. That's most studios at one time or another. So I don't think that's an argument that anyone wants to go down the road of. And also, Halo Infinite isn't even like a catastrophically bad game. Like, it's not a No Man's Sky. It's not a Cyberpunk sort of situation, right? It's got problems for sure, right? Like, the content rollout is way too slow. You could argue that that's Xbox's overall problem for this year. And in my opinion, and I don't think most people agree with me on this one, I think that Halo Infinite's campaign is by far the worst Halo campaign that there has ever been. But the gameplay of it is flawless. The gunplay, the movement, the grappling hook are all fantastic. Now, I understand that when we're talking about the core Halo fan base, the like very small centralized group that are the loudest on Twitter, we're talking about a group who threw a bitch fit when they added sprinting to Halo. A group who freaked out when they added the ability to aim down sights because it felt different. Like, it's just this core juvenile fan base who doesn't understand that you cannot put out the exact same game for 20 years and expect it to stay on top. And I think because that really crazy fan base exists, I do think that Halo has been sort of stagnated and in a fear of innovating because it might piss those idiots off, right? Which honestly they should just let those guys go. They're never going to be happy with anything in their lives, so they should just be let free. And then on top of that, I remember when Halo Infinite first came out, I was the crazy one because I was saying Halo Infinite is just not that good. Like, I didn't enjoy the multiplayer, I didn't enjoy the campaign, you know, and I was the crazy one. And then 4 to 5 months later, it just flipped. Like, the narrative just 180'd. And all of a sudden, everyone was like, it's the worst game ever. We should shut down 343. We should fire Bonnie Ross, despite the fact that she just handles the business side of the company and there's literally no control over the content of that game. Like, she makes sure that it's marketed and that people get paid on time. Like, that's her job. Do people not know that? She's literally a senior vice president. Like, she doesn't... Whatever. Okay. The point is, even if Halo Infinite is a bad game, putting out a bad game does not mean that a studio has bad management. It means that they put out a bad game. You could say that that's a sign of poor craftsmanship, or maybe there were some issues with the team at the time. But as long as everyone at that studio is doing well and is being treated well, like, the management is doing fine. Like, the management is doing their job. So I don't know what we're even talking about on this one. So let me just sort of wrap this all up and put a bow on it, right? I don't think that it's fair to hold an entire company responsible for the fact that issues have come up at that company. Because issues come up at every single company that has ever existed. What we should instead judge a company by is how they handle those issues when they do come up. And if you look at all the issues on this list that people are using to be weaponized against the Xbox fan base and the Xbox management, Xbox is handling all of these issues very well. People said that Xbox has no games. What did they do? They went out and they bought like 30 studios. They made deals to get games on Game Pass. They are going to Japan to build up relationships to get Japanese games to stop not coming to their platform. And we have seen progress on all of those fronts. The problems at Undead Labs, we didn't even hear about those until they were already on the road to recovery, right? I assume that the reason that people think that that one is an issue is because all they did was read the title of the article that said there's problems at Undead Labs and not the body of the article that said and they're already being fixed, right? The initiative having people quit is completely normal for a company trying to get on its feet. Them bringing in Crystal Dynamics to shore up those people leaving and get this game out on time is proof that they are taking steps, potentially very expensive steps, to make sure that those problems don't impact the game too much. And then 343 making bad games, look, they took the financial hit to give that game an extra year to put it out. They have made some very hard and very correct management decisions to make that game as good as it could be. They brought in Joseph Staten to course correct this thing. Now, maybe they did it too late, but we're going to start seeing a brand new 343 led by Joseph Staten, and I honestly believe that it's going to be significantly better. These are all problems that exist in the moment, but that are already well on their way to being solved. And I just think that people are taking these issues way too far, right? They're having problems. I get that, and I appreciate that, right? And I want these issues to be solved. And I'm not saying that Xbox is completely without fault, right? But if you're one of those crazy people who is calling for people to be fired, who's calling for Phil Spencer to be fired, or Matt Booty, or Sarah Bond, or Bonnie Ross, then you are not paying attention to all of the work and all of the progress that has been made because of those people. So that's all I wanted to say about all of this. And if you feel the same or different, I'd love to hear your thoughts about it in the comments down below. Genuinely, I'm very interested to hear all of the other viewpoints on it. It's just, this is something that I've been seeing on Twitter for a couple of weeks now, and it's been driving me crazy. I generally don't like being this combative in videos and sort of doing more sort of ranting, which is what this ended up feeling like, and I apologize for that. But if you did like this kind of content, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend, just tell me that you liked it in the comments, you know, whatever it is. I really appreciate all the support you guys have been giving me lately. It really, really means a lot to me. And until next time, I'll see you around.